Okay, guys.
Ready?
Oh, I have a clicker.
Hello everybody. Warm welcome to the session about device trust.
There's a heartbeat.
Who has heard of device trust before?
Whoa.
No,
That's half the
not
audience.
bad. Not bad.
Not bad.
Great.
So they are sponsor rookies. So this is why Alex asked me to do the intro and make sure it's not marketing bullshit. It is E2E compatible. So, and I was in a lucky situation that they informed me about their plans early on, because the three founders are here. Sascha Göckel, he's the CEO, and we have Jens Schmidt here, and we have John Alsop, who is head of development. So all the three founders are here. And if you have any questions about the details, don't ask me, ask them. But the good thing is they were all three, they were colleagues of mine. We all worked at Absence a couple of years ago. And so when they started their company, they used me as, well, they pitched, and they used me as somebody who was listening to their first pitches. So I remember we were sitting in my backyard and having a beer or two and a steak, or what was it? Yeah,
Steak and sausage.
And so they started pitching the ideas, and this is where they are now. Okay, it's about contextualizing IT. What does that really mean? So the idea is that the user is key when it comes to what you want to provide in terms of applications and in terms of digital workspace. And the thing is that if users log on, you cannot only use their membership to a security group or a number of security groups to define what the context is that they work in. Because today it's about mobile devices, it's about walking around with stuff and traveling to different places and working from different offices, working from home, working from a hotel, being at airports. And so it is very important to make sure that this context is reflected dynamically in the user session as soon as you start a remote session and you continue to use the remote session. So this is what they're talking about. So it is about checking out what is the user doing on his endpoint and then reflect that into the user session. So as it's shown here on this diagram, you have all these different methods of how to, well, remote into a user session. And as soon as you do that, you need to reflect this user context like I described earlier. And if you continue, you see now we have a much larger range of devices that are being used. Many of them are like tablets, like notebooks. If I look around and I look at myself, my primary machine that I'm working with is my laptop that I'm carrying around, and virtual sessions, virtual machines that I connect to. And how do you configure the, well, security settings? How do you configure which applications are presented to you on all of these things in order to stay secure, compliant, and within the boundaries of your regulation? And this is what they are concentrating on. And now I pass the floor to Sascha to take it from here. And hey, may the demo gods be with you.
Hopefully. Good news is I have recorded everything, so it should work.
That's good.
So, because Alex said the internet is not the best here, I said okay, so maybe I record.
Where's the fun?
Yeah, fun for you guys, but not for me. I get a heart attack. No, just to summarize what Benny was saying, and you're absolutely right. I think we are all coming from Absence, and we had a lot of customer projects and enterprise customers asking us, A, the road is not good enough. We want to know where the user is coming from within the corporate environment. They want to know, for example, hospital, when a doctor runs through the hospital and the Wi-Fi access point is constantly changing, you want to apply the printers, for example. No? And so what we found out is, yeah, Customers still have their management tools in place. Is this typical logon scripts? Is this GPO or is this like absence, res or whatever? Important one is you have only the role of the user to decide what you want to do with the management tools. And that's what we want to change. I think this is a really technical session. I'm not talking a lot of marketing. So I think you guys are aware more or less you have just the NetBIOS name of the endpoint and the IP address, and that's it. So this is what we address to solve out these requirements with our customers. When we talk about context, what does context mean? So for us, context is a combination of a lot of information. So we have grouped them in hardware-related information. For example, is this a tablet? Is this a Windows device? Is this whatever you want to use? Is this touch-enabled? It's about the software itself, what kind of software runs on the endpoint, what kind of security state has the endpoint, about the network itself, how is the endpoint connected to my Citrix environment, goes through Netscaler, goes through VPN, is this direct, I don't know. And also important where the user is coming from. So we have a lot of use cases at the moment in Germany, because we are a German company, which started out of Germany, where finance industries has requirements that they have one central Citrix farm, but people accessing around the world, and they don't want to have separate farms for different countries. They want to have everything on one board, on one thing, but they need to know if the user comes from Germany or is currently coming from Switzerland or somewhere else. This is what we need to understand about context. And about the user itself. So is the endpoint maybe remote controlled? Because if I'm using my endpoint, Windows 10 for example, I can remote control my Windows 10 endpoint, which is for a lot of customers a big security problem, because the context is not the context it seems to be. There's things like that. And that's what we define as context. We make this context available within the virtual world, which I will show you in a couple of seconds. So having that in mind, so what we're doing is, so we extend the management tools, the existing management tools, with our own actions and triggers. So we are able to trigger, for example, AppLocker fully dynamically. You know, AppLocker can only be configured via group membership. We can do it, or group membership, together with the context. We can use REST, we can use Ivanti, so whatever you're using, we can trigger that. And we deliver this context, which is important. So the context, together with my group membership, this is now be used to meet my requirements I have in this place. So, how does this work? This is just an architecture diagram. So we have, first of all, we have no requirements for any infrastructure. So we don't need to have a web server, a database or whatever. So it's all based on two components. The first component is my terminal server. So we are currently supporting RDP and ICA. And beginning of next year, we're supporting VMware, PCOYP, Blast Extreme, and we're supporting AWS with this native PCOYP installation. So this is what we need, is a piece of software. Here's our device trust host, and on the client side, we need a piece of software. Important, this software doesn't need to have any kind of configuration. That's important. Because what we want is a feedback from our customers to say, hey, just let the software installed, it has an auto update functionality, and that's it. I don't never want to touch this endpoint. And currently we're supporting Windows 7 onwards, and with the next Eagle OS operating system coming in December, we are fully integrated in all Eagle Sync clients. Because with agile, we have the requirement with this UD Pocket, maybe you're aware of that, the little USB stick. You plug this into a laptop, it's all secure, but nobody knows where it comes from. So this is what Device Trust is doing. So that's the architecture. All the configuration takes place here. There's no need to do anything on the endpoint. And currently we're using typical group policies. So we come from the, let's say, from the old IT world, from on-prem, but also beginning of next year we move back into cloud, because when we started with cloud, and the customers, at least in Germany, saying, oh, we have problems with cloud, so we move to on-prem, but we will also continue with the cloud area. So this is how it looks like on the Windows and iOS, agile side. We're also supporting double hop or multi-hops. It's not ending here. So we have also a lot of customers, or we had one large customers in Switzerland, a finance institute. They have one first published desktop, and then they go into different application silos. And the problem here as well is they want to know this context here as well. So we deliver that context fully. I will show you that. And last but not least, we're also supporting iOS right now, but iOS doesn't use this virtual channels, or doesn't support virtual channels for ICA or for RDP. So we have applied 2 patents. One is to use the virtual channel, and the other one is to use a service, let's say a kind of gateway, which is currently running in Microsoft Azure. And then we are also able to deliver the whole context of that endpoint into the virtual world. For you guys, if you're interested to have a play with the software, we offer a 12 months unlimited license for your own environment. If you're interested, just visit our website, put your data in, and then you can apply for a license, and you get from us the email, nice friendly email with a license key and some options how to do it. We also offer you web sessions, so we can do a one-to-one session. So we are really, really interested about your feedback. So also when I show you now the product, and you will see all the different properties we have. If you have ideas about properties you like to have for your project or whatever, just give us send me an email, and we are open to implement things like that. So let's go into the product. Let's see how it works. So, first of all, we are working totally seamless with whatever you're using. In this case, we're using Storefront. It could be NetScaler, it could be VPN, traditional VPN, whatever. We don't care. That's important. We don't care how the session gets established. As long as there is a session option, we work fully transparent. And what I'm doing here is I'm just using Storefront. And also important to know, to say, we're using here published desktop, but we are also working with published applications. But to show you the integration, I just use published desktop. That's the point. So what I'm doing here, I'm just signing in my environment as usual. And for us, it's the lesson we learned from our first customers is that customers are very, sorry, can just show you something here as well. This is our technology. This little thing connecting to. That's the only thing you see with device trust. In this case, as long as this appears, we are going back to the endpoint and telling the endpoint what kind of information we want from the endpoint. We deliver at the moment around about 250 properties, and then the server, you can say, for example, I'm not interested in geolocation, then we will tell at that moment the client, I don't want geolocation from you, and then we just send up what is required. That's a technology on a log on. And then if I signed in, for us it was important that we support different management solutions. And so just stopping here and just make this a bit bigger. So we have we had customers using normal logon scripts. We have customers using absence as the other extreme. And important piece is make this context properties easy accessible. One thing is we do it via the registry. So you can access this information via the registry. We can briefly go through what kind of informations are available. So we see here, for example, my surrounding access point. So everything which starts with device is really my endpoint. This is really this endpoint. And again, it's recorded, therefore we have different networks here. Then we have information, for example, about my security components. The Microsoft Action Center, for example, tells me all the states of my security components on the endpoint. Oops. I can also check for certificates. It could be a computer certificate, it could be a user certificate I want to check for. And then it also shows me lots of hardware related information. So for example, what you see here is things like, oh, it's very hard to go around this table all the time. It's, for example, you see here information about the displays connected to my endpoint. The important one is this DPI one. We won a lot of projects where customers facing issues with modern Windows 10 laptops which have a high DPI value, for example 200 or something. And there was always challenges with published application, published desktop, this doesn't look right. And what we are doing with Device Trust, we get this information, make it available fully dynamic in the virtual session. Before the shell starts, they're using this value, then it's similar. And that's fully dynamic. And this is, for example, a use case we are tracing right now. This is all hardware related information. So it's about the hardware I'm really using and just about talking about use cases. The BIOS serial number is quite important. We're doing together with FS Logics with application masking. We have joint customers that want to do device-based licensing. but in normal circumstances, the NetBIOS name is just useless because you can change it. And what we are doing, we combine that together with FS Logics to the serial number. Then we have a unique identifier where we can make sure the application is accessible or not. If we're going down, you see here also my geolocation in all the details. So this is starting here. In normal instance, the customer is only interested in if the user comes from Germany or in what kind of city is currently connected. So not all these details is always required, and we can change this, we can configure that. This is just geolocation.
When he demonstrated that the first time in my lab, he really scared me because he did that and he was only using my access point that I have at home and using a backend service that they're consuming, and he was able to go into Google Maps and show me our house and the corner of the house where we were sitting. And I was like, whoa.
Yeah, it was funny.
Yeah. You thought it was fun.
It also surprised us because John, our lead developer, said, Sasha, this is very good, it's very accurate.
It is.
I want to try it, and he was right. It was really good.
I can
it is still
confirm
really
that.
good. So what we're using technology-wise is very simple. We're collecting the available Wi-Fi access points on the endpoint, send it over to a geolocation provider. The best in the world is Google, and Google returns back all the details. And then we have everything what we need, and that's the magic behind. The other one, as you can see here, are logical disk and map drives. And you maybe think about, why did I want to know what kind of shares are available and drives available on the endpoint? I don't care. You care at that point where you have your users using a DFS share on the endpoint, which gets remapped into the Citrix world. And then the user, when he's connecting this DFS share or this corporate share, it always goes back to the endpoint and back to the data center. This doesn't fit really. And we have an enterprise customer, we won an enterprise project where the customer was saying, you know what, I just want to map the drive, I cannot map directly within the virtual session. So if my corporate drive is already accessible here, I don't want to map this dynamically with Citrix. I just do it directly within the virtual session, because then I have a much better performance. And that's why we use this information to apply the Citrix client drive mapping fully dynamically. This is just a use case out of that. And we also want a customer is using this just for hardware inventory. That was the other one. So going forward, we see here now, the next one, just going here, that's fine. Going back a little bit. Then we see all the network properties of my endpoint. So you see here that we have 2 network cards in this device. You see all detailed information, including Wi-Fi information. The Wi-Fi BSSID is used quite often now in healthcare environments. As I said before, when you walk with your device through the hospital, and we can fully dynamically apply the right printers where you are in the business. This is used for this example. You see all the other details. I think it's all technical details, but important is this gateway MAC address. This is used from our customers to identify. It's funny, chicken home, because it means in English chicken. So that's my Wi-Fi chicken home. So that's the story behind that. But the MAC address of the gateway you're using, this is easy to identify. Is this a corporate office where I'm coming from? So simple. It's very simple to identify things. Continue with that. You see here what operating system I'm using. You see the operating system ID, again another identifier to identify the endpoint, which is used for licensing, for corporate device or whatever. You see here policies. So is a specific policy required? Or when I say as a customer, you can only access my environment when the policy is met, my policy requirements are met. But if it's external people, you have no control over that. We deliver you the information. We have here the information about, is this a mobile device, for example? What kind of printer is available on the endpoint? And this can be all queried, as we can define what kind of printers I want to see here. There's lots of use cases around that. You see this printer arrow. This is quite interesting. That was our first customer we won. And this was about a small customer, but people or user was complaining Citrix is shit because I cannot print. And if you identify that, what was the reason why you couldn't print was not that Citrix was shit, This problem was that the printer was running out of toner, out of paper, and this is a problem you will never see in the Citrix world. So if you start to analyze that, it's very hard. We deliver this information to you. Continue. And then we have normal stuff like, stop here, is we have things like, here you can see all the regional settings, the remote client. This is also interesting. This tells you exactly how the ICA client is connected with the server. Is this a direct connection? It goes over a NetScaler, all this kind of stuff. We can also see information about the user itself. What kind of rights has the user? How is the user authenticated on the endpoint? You see all the who is information the internet service provider used on the endpoint to find out where it's coming from. And then we go in the last bit. It's lots of security information. So you see here the Windows Defender in all details. And this is, for example, also used. We have this information here about behavior threats and signature threats. So is any virus identified on the endpoint? Then we can act on that. This goes beyond then to the firewall, Windows update, etc., etc. Those are all information starting with device reflecting my endpoint. And we can get all the same information also for the host, but it doesn't make sense to have things like this for my Citrix server. I'm just showing you the ones which are interesting. This is, for example, the bandwidth, the latency of my session. We have also the information what kind of published application or desktop I'm accessing, what's the name of my published application, etc., etc. This can all be configured. You can select what kind of information you want. This is all default what you see here. So that is number one. So that's the first way how we show the context properties. The second way is, just forward a little bit, is we have the same information available as environment variables. I'm not going through this again, but you see it's available. And the third option is we offer a command line interface to make this, stop here. To offer also another way how you can get access to these properties. And the reason why we're offering these three different options is because we have customers who want to use it different. And that's the secret behind. We can configure that all. If you say I don't want to have it as environment variables, we can stop that. So, but we go beyond that. If I start now a double hop connection, I'm showing that as another published desktop. I'm connecting now from within the first Citrix session. And if I open here the registry, you have to see the same information about the endpoint as you see in the first session. There's no difference. The only difference is, this is what you see right now. It's what is the name of the first ICA session. So that's what we see here. Now, all this information are here. This showing you what is the name or property of the first hop I'm coming from. This can also be configured. So let's move on. So, but we are not stopping now. So then what we have seen here, we make sure this information is always up to date on logon and on reconnect. But we can also make changes during session runtime. I want to demonstrate that here with a firewall as an example. As you have seen here, the firewall state was communicated by Microsoft as a good state. This is also the case here right now, within the session as well. And if I start now to manipulate the firewall, this could be user error, this could be malicious code, it could be anything. You see this gets immediately updated, and as well as in the virtual session. If you're going down a little bit, you see it's immediately there. So we can also make sure that this context is always up to date. Important enough, what you have seen before was all the context properties, but what we normally do in customer scenarios is things like that. We define together with the customer different context information. So for example, the context information could be how you access this environment, internal, external, from what kind of corporate office you're coming from. So those are the information which are aggregated behind the scenes with the logic out of these properties to define the context. And then this context is used within my management tool to define access. And that's what I want to show you in the next one. This is also the same for published for the double hop. So if I go into the double hop, you see the same information available. So But as I said before, with device trust we also have an active component. What you see in here, on the desktop here, it's a folder called device trust action. It's here and here. It's not really, okay, you see it. So, important, this is two separate profiles, there's no folder redirection or something. It's just the way we can show you that we can also act on things if the context is changing. So if I let this running, and again, I show you that with a firewall, you see that the desktop disappears here because the firewall state is no longer good. And this is important for you, that we are able to change the behavior of the desktop depending on the context, and this is fully dynamic. With this folder is just a simple example. The next example I want to show you is with AppLocker, to show that we can fully dynamically configure AppLocker. In this scenario, we have our critical business application. In this case, it's Notepad++. It's just an example. This is running because the context, or the security context, is what we expect. And if the security context is changing now, again, I use this in this example, the firewall. You see, we identify that. We can show a message box. You can write here whatever you want. You can define timeouts or whatever. It's up to you. And then if I try to start the application again, that AppLocker is using that to block this application, is the security state comes back to what it should be, then we can run again my super critical business application, and again, and this is what we use behind the scenes is AppLocker. So we use AppLocker to fully dynamically configure the security to access applications within the virtual session. We also do this with FS Logics, which I'll show you in one of the next videos. Any questions until now? Perfect.
Are you impressed?
Yeah? Woo! Now it's good. Now I feel better. Because it was always, Benny said, when you present on pub forum or E2EVC, there's all experts. I said, I'm getting very nervous now, but it's good to hear that. Good. Perfect. The next example is conditional access now. This is access to the virtual environment. So what we're doing here, and this is again, we don't care if you come internal, external, we don't care. So again, this is now based on the Wi-Fi state. So if you get access or not. So we have here my chicken home network, which is secured, which I say is fine, it's secured, you can sign in, it's fine. This is what we will see now. I can sign in, and again you see our technology a bit, it was quite quick, appears here. Then I can sign in. You will see that the Wi-Fi is now is secured, it's true, and therefore I can work with the session, I can run my business applications or whatever you want to do. If I now disconnect the session, going back to my endpoint, go to an open Wi-Fi, this could be on a reconnect with Netscaler, whatever you're using, and then if I try to access again the environment, we will get blocked out because of the Wi-Fi, because of the Wi-Fi network is not encrypted or secured. Simple as that. If I disconnect that, go back, go to my Wi-Fi, which is secure, signing in, and then I'm in again. Simple as that. It's very simple, and this is our technology, this context analysis to block the desktop. And that was just an example about, we call this conditional access based on Wi-Fi. We can do this on everything. We can do this on geolocation. Yeah, sorry.
The files, are they removed or blocked with security permissions, or are...
Which files you mean?
In the
video before,
yeah,
with the desktop icon.
Yeah,
The folder.
Yeah, this was,
folders.
in this case it was just a plain folder, but we can change NTFS
Did
permissions.
you
as well.
delete it or?
We have just deleted in this
okay.
case.
But then there's a policy you set.
Yeah, exactly. I tell you later how we do it right now, or maybe I can explain it a little bit. At the moment, this is all done with PowerShell. So whatever you have seen here, can we combine, configure it however you want that, because we're using PowerShell, VB script, PowerShell, whatever you want to use in the background, to use all this functionality. And we have, I'll show you that later, is a command processor which allows you to use with security around that to apply AppLocker policies, for example, to apply this desktop block. I can show you that simple scripts, but in the next release we're going over to a UI-driven configuration, but we still have this option. But you can also manipulate NTFS permissions, because we have two options how we can apply actions.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, that was just an example with Wi-Fi. The next one is also a typical use case of our customers, and it's simple little things. And the use case here is we want to change the GPO settings fully dynamically, because GPOs can only be applied on logon, and that's it. No really refresh. We want to do it fully dynamically. And the real use case for that customer was when a user comes from internal, from the storefront, we want that the screensaver in the session is disabled. So no screensaver because the device has already a screensaver. Why should I do another screensaver in the session? It's just from the user's perspective, it's just shit, because I need to do it again. And if you have published applications, you need to do it again and again and again. And in this use case, what we're saying, if you're coming from internal, we know the devices, this is all security devices, no screensaver in the session. If you're doing a disconnect and reconnect from external, we will fully dynamically enable screensaver, because we don't know where you're coming from. That's the use case. So what we're doing here is now internal. This is Windows 7. Signing in. Showing you that we are internal. Then what we're doing, we're setting the registry values and make sure they are immediately active for the corresponding settings like screensaver. You see here, screensaver is not enabled, so we could wait now, so no screensaver activated. I disconnect now the session and switch now to Windows 10 with NetScaler. As you see it here quickly, NetScaler. Doing a reconnect. So we block also the access to the desktop at that moment. There's no way you can get it. So see, it's now external, and the settings, you already spot that, was already done. So if I go out, wait 10 seconds, and then the screensaver gets applied after 10 seconds. Sometimes interesting when you wait 10 seconds, it's quite long. And in some situations the life is just quite quick. So, and you see I can sign in now again, and it's working. So this is just to show that we can do this with GPO settings. We can do this for HK current user, we can do this also for HK local machine, but HK local machine doesn't make sense on terminal server. It's more VDI thing, not on a RDSH stuff. So this is just an example. And then we're coming to the FS Logics integration. Again, the story is here absolutely the same. The stuff is here coming from internal, coming from external. Also worked on disconnects and reconnects. It's internal access, and we configure now dynamically AppLocker. So AppLocker FS Logics to add the user to the policy. You see my business critical application. So we say it's internal. And we use FS Logics now to say, hey, make this application available. And as you can see here, Notepad is available. So what I'm doing now is signing off, signing in again from external. And again, I'm just using NetScaler, but it could be also VPN solution, could be anything. We don't care what it is. And if I start the session now again, you will see the application completely disappeared from within the virtual session. But this technology is done by FS Logics, not by us, but we're telling FS Logics to remove the application right now. No? That's what you see. The desktop icon disappeared because it's external, and if I go to the Windows Explorer, you will see the application is not visible anymore to the user, and that's what we use with application masking from FS Logics, what we can do. That's the magic. If I do now a disconnect and reconnect, this also works on reconnect. Also, when the session already runs, we can also close the session and then reconfigure FS Logics to remove the application. So if I do now a reconnect, you see the application disappear. The application is already there on the reconnect. So this is fully dynamically. The application is back now. Simple, very easy. And the last video. The last video, and then I go a bit more in the administrative interface, is our agile implementation. So it's just to show you that it's also working. Again, this is Wi-Fi driven because it's a use case we have. This is a secured Wi-Fi, and if I use now Eagle, or agile as it sounds in English, to connect to the environment, we can use in this case AppLocker and allow the application, because Wi-Fi is secured. This is the use case we're using here. And you can see also in a bit all the information we have on agile. This is not the end. This is just where we started with agile. So we can extend that. If you guys have ideas about information of the endpoint we can deliver, we can do this. It's not very hard. What we're doing in this use case is we're looking up for, again, about the Wi-Fi, if the Wi-Fi is secured or not, and then I can start the application. If I use now Wi-Fi which is not secure, you saw that before, I don't need to show that again, or maybe we do now a reconnect. We change the Wi-Fi to an open one, reconnect to the session, and application gets closed down. And no way to start the application. So that's what I want to show you about from the demo point of view. Any questions until now? Okay, we have the interesting piece here is. Yeah.
Do you need on every device an agent on the whole? Where you start to log in the agents on the endpoint?
No, we can also work, as we know, when someone comes without the endpoint. What we can do on this side, we can define if you get access or do we deny access. In this case, if you have no client installed. No? I show you that now, or later we have a black and white list approach to configure all this kind of stuff. So you can say...
It's a limited number of parameters
that
you get because the agent is missing.
Yeah.
The agent gives you a lot more information, but they're collecting as much as they can.
You can deny login without any.
Yes, absolutely. and you can configure that completely as you want.
Contractors install the agent first.
I'm sorry, this is all, description is all in German because I've forgotten to change it into English. But all the configuration is really done by GPOs. No? In this case I use a local GPO. You might think about why is he now showing me a local GPO on a fat client. Everything I've showed you works 100% of the endpoint as well. So we're also supporting the same kind of technology on the endpoint. So because we have customers saying it's nice that I can block application access on the central platform, but the user can take away his laptop and goes to the same unsecure Wi-Fi area network and can run the local application. So we want to control that as well. And that's the reason we have everything also local, and I'm just showing that on the local side. So you can configure a lot of stuff here. I'm not going through all the kind of stuff, but for example, if you say we don't want to offer the ability to trigger AppLocker, then you can define it here. There's the policies you can use for that. We can also, first of all, say, I think it's a bit better, no? Well, I'm surprised, Benny. You sit in the first row and you couldn't read that.
I can see it.
Okay, that's okay. I just worried a little bit. No, what we can do is, first of all, we can trigger or we can define who gets this device trust functionality. Because when we started, and we have customers saying, oh, we're using that first for our external people, or you can address that to say, here with a whitelist, you can say only for this specific Active Directory group of users. That's it. We also work with a blacklist. Blacklist means if you want to blacklist someone from the whitelist, then it's a way you can do this kind of stuff. This works the same for when you come without a client. That's exactly the same configuration. So maybe I leave that on. So desktop access is a way where we define exactly this kind of policies. So we can here define, again, with a whitelist. We call this untrusted device. So device without a device trust client is for us untrusted. That's the naming for that. And then you can define here what you want. You can also show the user a message when it comes from an untrusted device. And you see here our default message. So this is the access denied, you don't have the software required, blah, blah, blah. Important one is our software will be available soon from our website because customers saying they don't want to offer the software download internally for their external people. They want to go for device trust. It's a public place, download the software, install it, and with the auto update function, I don't care about this anymore. And with this one, we can notify the user what he could do. This is also works in one language, but it also works in other languages. So for example, as we are in Germany, we also work with German. You can change that here. So for example, you could say, if it's for native German, then the message box is Hello Benny. So I can use a German word for that. So we identify on the log on what kind of settings you have.
That is English as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
You never want to know what oil
Yeah.
means.
We can change that, but we can also go, for example, we could do it with Carsten is Swiss, so we could say like this, but we can go also say it's just whatever it is, it's German, and he gets this message. And that works for all the things we are doing. All message boxes can be defined here. And that's what we can define here. We have desktop pop-ups is also something we're supporting, so we can also offer desktop pop-ups, what the name means. Use case, a very simple use case for that is quite funny, but with agile they told us, oh, can you do one major stuff for us, which is a big problem. We said, what's the challenge? Yeah, we have always Citrix in full screen on laptops or agiles, but sometimes the device runs out of battery and then the user is working, forgotten to plug in this power supply, and then the device dies. We can identify that. We can show the user within the virtual session a nice message box to say, hey, the battery is now on critical, just plug in your power supply, simple things. This goes more like mobile integration, or we integrate with Azure. Here are the properties you can easily go into. For example, for certificates, you can define what kind of certificates you're looking for. Maybe you doesn't want to have hundreds of certificates of the endpoint, you only want to know if one specific one is there or not. But then I can go into here and I can easily say, oh, geolocation, I don't care, just deactivate it. Then no geolocation is available within the virtual session. If I say, no, I like geolocation, but I just want to have the country code, then I just select what I want to know. And again, remind you, this is all configured in a central place. If the user comes with the endpoint and connecting this day to customer A, he gets a device trust configuration A. This is the next day working for another customer, he gets a separate one. Therefore, we don't need to have a config on the endpoint. That's quite important. This is what we can configure. The same goes for host filters. So for host properties, we can apply the location provider. We can control here also the registry manipulation, and then we're coming to our trigger engine. And the trigger engine is very powerful. So we're offering different triggers like log on, log off, reconnect. Okay, you can read on your own. Disconnect, desktop starting, property change. Important one, we can do this with user privilege and we can do this with system privilege. Why is system privilege important? Manipulate Citrix policies. You need to have higher priorities, higher rights. And important one, whatever runs here has always access to the user-specific context. That's important. So this is what we're using, for example, on log on. We find out, oh, is a non-corporate device. Non-corporate device inside the company. We can enable Citrix line drive mapping. Is this the same device external? We can disable this fully dynamically. And that's why we need to have this higher privileges on that side. What you can do within this, different triggers. Not using this one, using one which is not configured. At the moment, we're offering any kind of executable. It could be VB script, it could be Kix, it could be whatever you want to use. Native is PowerShell and Batch. We will extend that also to VB script and going forward with this. So this is what you can apply to that. You can also define here what order you want to execute these different triggers, because maybe you say system needs to be run first before user starts, for example. And this is what we can do here. This will be not get replaced in the future, but we will offer within the next major release somewhere in Q1 the opportunity to drive everything also GUI driven. So what we will have in the future, we will still go for GPO, but on the right hand side what you see here will be all web based. This will be a really nice interface where you can configure your own rules, or if you are you like to script and you're a big scripter, then you can use the triggers as well. And behind the scenes, my last point is smaller, is to show you how we can do all this AppLocker stuff. And this again is very simple. So what we have is something called Benny? So it's something called device trust command processor. And this device trust command processor has a security layer around it that not everyone can use it and all this kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, this is be used to do everything I've showed you, to manipulate the AppLocker config. AppKill, I always think John is a bit hard word, because we are also able to close the application, but we can also kill it.
So you can close it gracefully.
Yes, correct. And this is sometimes with AppKill. Then we have AppLocker. configuration. We have the desktop lock, this conditional access we can do here quite easily. We have the opportunity. I'm going just a bit up. We have the opportunity to raise events. This is a command line interface to get properties. We can show pop-up. Thank you. We have the registry manipulation, which is all immediately updated. And we have the sync option. The sync option is for those UEM solutions which are on a reconnect. We need to build this in to say, if there's no clear order on the reconnect, we can use the sync, for example, to say, wait for device class to deliver all the context information into the virtual session before you do your own stuff. And that's what we are doing. My last piece, and I'm done. Everything we're doing, everything is all written down to the event log. So we have, or event viewer, however you want to call it. We have here lots of different events. We have also errors, as you can see here. But this is my local device now, so everything is reported. We can also report dynamic changes, whatever you want. Everything is here. And the reason why we're doing that, not that we're not offering a reporting solution, is because most customers already have a reporting solution that they want to get this context integrated in what they have. That's the idea. So that was my last slide. Hopefully it was not too much information, but I think my last point is really, it's funny for us as well when we look back how we presented a year ago when we started in 2016 and we look where we are now. The use cases are totally different. We have security use case, we have compliance use case, we have regulatory use case, we have configuration use case, simple network share mapping, printer mapping. It's endless, the whole story, and this is where we like to get. You guys also have a play with the software. We can do something with you. We are interested to get feedback, and thank you for your time here. Over to Benny.
Thank you.